Grad School 101 with Dr. Bradbury.
Hi, this is Dr. Bradbury. Welcome back to another edition of Grad School 101. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's personally near and dear to my heart, and that is what to do if you find yourself in the unenviable position of having a lower than ideal GPA, but really wanting to go to a doctoral program. If what you want to do is get a PhD in clinical psychology, which was the PhD that I really wanted to get, and of course is a crazy competitive kind of thing to try to accomplish. If that's what you want to do, but your GPA is not what you want it to be, you actually, you take heart. We can help you with those. If I can do it, you can do it. My GPA was really pretty bad when I graduated from UT. Definitely not something that I'm very proud of there, but it's important. I think that it was a good experience for me, partly because it really helped me to understand how to help students who are in a situation where what they want to do is manage to achieve something very important to them personally in their professional lives, even though maybe they've had a few bumps along the way. So let's think about this. First of all, bear in mind that your GPA is not one thing, and that of course, if you have a lower GPA, it's probably the case that you can identify specific places where your GPA took a hit, right? Specific semesters or specific classes or that sort of thing. You have a story that's involved with why your GPA is no good. Now, how good that story is and how sort of socially acceptable that story is part of what's going to determine what your pathway is toward the advanced degree that you want. Now, in my case, I happen to have the good fortune, I guess you could say, to have a really good story about my bad GPA because I was a teen mom. So I had this wonderful daughter when I was in high school, and then I managed to graduate and come to college. And as I was struggling my way through college, I was working 2 jobs, I was supporting myself, and I had this little girl that I was raising. And so that meant that, of course, I was a little bit more spread thin than would have been ideal. I made plenty of mistakes. I didn't drop classes when I should have, and all kinds of things like that. And part of what became important over time was that I could demonstrate that I was getting better and better over time at actually achieving and accomplishing being a really good student. So my GPA got better. It was worse earlier in my academic career and then got better over time. This is the preferred way that you want it, unless you have a very specific thing, the bomb that went off, that can be described. Now, generally speaking, if you have some kind of story that involves some level of empathy that people are going to have for you, if you have sort of a complicated story about trying to make good, you're the first person in your family maybe to go to college, and so there were some bumps along the way culturally there, this is the sort of thing that can also be described in the personal statement as part of the reason for why it is that this GPA is not representative of your abilities. And you want to make sure that you think about it that way and describe it that way, that the GPA just does not represent you well when it comes to the elements of your application. And remember, if your GPA does not represent you well, if you have a good story that goes behind it, then you can tell that story. And part of that will be in having, hopefully, one of your letter of recommendation writers also vouch for that story, to say something about how you've come a long way, or this was the problem that happened earlier and now things have gotten better and have been solved, right? Why they expect that you will do well in graduate school, even though you have this sort of less than representative GPA, right? So that's another way to think about that, is to make sure to have a letter of recommendation writer potentially back up the story that you're saying. Now, maybe you have a bad GPA and you've got no good story. There's nothing there. There's nothing that you could say like, yeah, they're going to understand this story well. Maybe it's a story that's too dark, or maybe it's a story that involves you not really getting yourself together in some way, right? If this is the case, you still have some options. Okay? You still have some options. And one option, of course, is to take a gap year. Right? Once you graduate, is to take a gap year and do something during that year that actually helps to increase your competitiveness for these clinical doctoral PhD programs, or for grad school in general, if that's what you're looking at. So know that when you do that, there are a few different things that you can do, right? One is a master's degree. So there are lots of people who go and pursue a master's in clinical, and a master's in clinical psychology is actually not a licensable degree. So it's not a clinical degree in the sense of going and working with patients. It's actually a little bit of a remedial research degree in the sense that it will actually help you to develop that GPA and demonstrate that you actually can do well in a research-oriented setting before you go on to apply to those doctoral programs that are very research-oriented. So if what you're trying to do is get into a clinical PhD doctoral program, right, and you don't have a good GPA and you don't have a good story for your low GPA, then you might want to think about pursuing that master's degree as a way to demonstrate that you are capable of graduate level work and that you'd be a good bet for them. The other thing that you can potentially do also is obtaining a job that's related to the field that you're working in, that you're wanting to work in, right? So that if, for example, you're a lab manager for somebody's lab in the year following your graduation, this can also be something that can then build up your application so that you're helping to kind of make up for the fact that you've got this lower GPA by pumping up the volume on some of the other qualifications that you have. This can also lead to a stronger letter of recommendation potentially, which can then also help to make up for that lower GPA. So remember that one of the reasons that I'm here talking to you today about this low GPA issue and what to do about getting into graduate school is because I know that life can hand us these little bumps along the way and that we can actually have to kind of push through and struggle through things to be able to become who we want to be. And for me, that just took a lot of not letting other people discourage me. So I really think that it's very important that you remember that there are lots of people that will tell you that you can't get into graduate school with a low GPA. There were lots of people that told me that too, and I ignored them. I literally said, I'm not going to listen to what you're telling me, and instead, I'm going to listen to the people who are encouraging me. And I'm going to take their advice about what kinds of things I can do to make myself as appealing as I can be as an applicant for these doctoral programs, and to really look on the positive side and try to keep working toward the thing that I want to do. You can do that too. And so if you're in a place now where you're like, oh, this looks insurmountable, it's just so far away, remember that you can do this, that you can think of me as a model in that way, that if you chip away at it, it might take you longer. It took me longer than it took most people. If you chip away at it and you do the things that you need to do to kind of help with that application process, you will, of course, get into graduate school and you'll go on to do the wonderful things that you want to do. I know you will. So remember that you can also choose where you apply. All doctoral programs are not created equal, and it is the case that they're a very small subsection of these programs, are very elite. There is definitely a little stratum of programs that it would be extremely difficult to get into with any kind of ding in your application, with any element of your application not being fantastic, right? But that's just the tiny little surface, and that actually there are many, many high-quality graduate programs, some of which are more research-focused and some of which are more clinically focused, right? All are PhD programs, that there are PhD programs that are of a wide variety of quality. So you want to not go too low, right? Remember that you're coming out of a great school and that you're capable of great things and that you want to go on to another great place. But you also want to think about the fact that there are probably lots of institutions, lots of universities that you haven't necessarily even considered yet for your applications. Make sure that if you have any element of your application that's weak, like a lower GPA, for example, that you go ahead and apply to enough places, and that you apply to places that are broadly geographically spread out, because your application is actually going to be worth more the farther away you send it, because these programs want geographic diversity represented in their students. So you can submit your Texas applications in Texas. We get a whole lot of Texas applications, that's for sure. Or you can submit your application from Texas farther away. You could submit it to Alaska, right? You don't have to go to Alaska, you can go anywhere, but you could submit it anywhere, right? And the farther away you're willing to go, the more likely it is that they are saying to themselves, whoa, we got an applicant from Texas. We've been hoping for a UT person for years. That kind of thing, as opposed to, oh, another person from UT. So remember that you can apply smart, and that if you do this and you think about this strategically and you go toward this and keep your eyes on the prize, don't give up, that you can do it and that you can achieve anything that you want to achieve. I'm living proof. This has been Dr. Bradbury with another edition of Grad School 101.